Hi Victoria, you're in
Hi,
Kashmir
hi.
after a long time and you have been here for some time now. Tell us how different it is for you to be in Kashmir again after your last visit.
Well, it's different, but it's also the same because even during the last visit, there was this uncertainty. There was the fact that the political situation isn't stable. And I think what I've found this trip has been this overriding uncertainty amongst the youth, which coming from the Western world, coming from the UK, is depressing. I mean, there's uncertainty in everybody's lives. They don't quite know what their future holds. But on the other hand, they don't feel that the future might hold nothing. And this is what I felt about being back in Kashmir. Is I've met a number of young people, people who've a bit more mature. They've got their children. They want their children to grow up in an environment of stability. And you don't see that stability here. And that, to me, is the greatest tragedy of Kashmir.
Do you think there is this like for them young people, what is the one thing that really stops them? What did you understand from there? What were they saying?
Well, it's the fact that, at the moment the state's under governor's rule. And of course, we are talking at a time when you've just had the general election of the Lok Sabha. And whether the government of Prime Minister Modi gets back in again or whether there's a Congress government. And that, of course, will be a bit of a game changer, I think, for people in Jammu and Kashmir. But it's just the fact that one young person came to me and he said, well, actually, I really would like to have a job outside Kashmir, outside India, because supposing I'm in Kashmir, I like to ride my motorbicycle. I get stopped by the military and suddenly they say, you're a militant. And then suddenly my future isn't anywhere. That's the uncertainty. People just don't know what's going to happen from day to day.
There are a lot of there has been an escalation since the February 14 suicide attack in Latpura, and then the whole airstrikes and things like those. So internationally, how where do you think the Kashmir has been taken with that kind of coverage and with that kind of space? Where is it right now?
Well, yet again, it puts Kashmir back on the agenda, but for the wrong reasons, because it puts it back on the agenda in terms of what's happening between India and what's happening with Pakistan. And it sort of turns it back into that territorial dispute between India and Pakistan. Whereas, as we know, there's a lot more to the Jammu Kashmir issue than simply talking about its position in relation to how India feels about it, or indeed how Pakistan feels about it. And what you really need to do is have these high-level, high sort of publicity opportunities to be an opportunity to say, well, actually, this was incredibly dangerous for all our peoples, and we've now got to talk. But you get the reverse. You get the absolute reverse, that Kashmir is off the agenda in terms of resolution, because you've just had a high-level terrorist attack. And that, I think, again, is the wrong way to go about it. Because what you really need is to move forward, to discuss what shape of azadi, what shape of movement would satisfy the inhabitants of the state, so that then you can not have another terrorist attack and put the whole of South Asia again on high alert. I think it was very fortunate the way things worked out after Pulwama and Balakot. But you might not be so lucky next time, and you might find that the whole region is at war.
Do you think there will be a next time for a situation like that?
I'm afraid I do, Fahad. I think there will be. I said this after Mumbai. There will be a next time. There will be a next time, because you've got Kashmir as a totem. That people, they say they're doing this for the sake of Kashmir. They're actually not. It doesn't help the Kashmiris at all. But it's a totem that you can attach your sort of frustration to. But as I say, it doesn't help resolve the political issue, which is what you need to be resolved. And it only takes a few people. It doesn't, but a few people who are alienated. What you have to do is get rid of the alienation, understand the alienation. Why are young people dying? Why are they becoming militants? I understand the militancy is maybe 200, 250 people. But it's still 200, 250 people, although militants keep getting killed. So that means more young people are still becoming militants. And you have to understand that. And one of the meetings I've had during my stay has been to meet a young Canadian, in fact, who's working with this Kashmir Lifeline, and they're trying to provide alternatives to help with the frustration. And in terms of martial arts, in terms of counseling, in terms of therapy, the difficulty with something like that is there's a stigma sort of attached because people don't like to think that people have mental issue problems, but everybody has trauma. Dealing with trauma is a very difficult aspect of growing up. And what I have found, the other, asked me about coming back here, is that I'm hardly meeting anybody, in the sort of young entrepreneurial age who hasn't been just always a child of the conflict. The elders are the elders, but anybody born in the middle 1980s and onwards has not known anything other than conflict.
Yeah. We have lived this conflict. I'm from the same generation and we have seen, I can understand what you're talking about. But, looking at more the larger aspect that, there was in 2004 times when there was Musharraf in Pakistan, and a lot of people and analysts would say that it's a one window opportunity right now for India and Pakistan to have talks because everything is up to Musharraf. So how do you think the situation today for the two countries to talk? Like, you have been traveled to Pakistan, the administration. What is it like with the Imran Khan administration? Do you think it's an easier thing than Nawaz Sharif?
No, I think it's more difficult now because I think it depends on who comes back into power in India, and depends on where there's a will for really moving this issue forward, and which by moving the issue forward will mean you will be able to reduce human rights abuses, because while you've got militarization, you're going to continue to have human rights abuses. You've got to get to the next level. I think there was an opportunity with Musharraf and Manmohan Singh. I think this is one of the tragedies of being an observer of politics. You see these missed opportunities. You see you're that close, and yet somehow it's sort of like the tectonic plates aligning. It then just gets out of alignment, and then something else takes over within the domestic situation, whether it's another Indian election or whether it's the problems that Musharraf faced domestically, and then you've lost that opportunity. Which is why, to me, it's very important always to keep the issue live, because you never quite know when you're going to have that opportunity. At the moment, people were saying, especially after Pulwama and Balakot, not a hope of anything until the Indian elections. So, these next few months are going to be very important in terms of who's the next Prime Minister of India, and whether that next Prime Minister of India, whether it's Modi again, sees the value of actually saying the bigger picture, instead of this blame game, is that we must have talks, because certainly without talks nothing's going to happen. And in this vacuum of no talks, you do have the opportunity for a few people to think, well, we're going to, out of anger, frustration, whatever prompts people to mount a terrorist attack.
There were a lot of gestures made by Imran Khan, who continuously kept saying that he wants talks. And what do you think it is difficult to have with Imran Khan administration there and with whosoever comes in power here?
Well, I think, again, if Imran Khan at the moment, backed obviously as he is by the Pakistan military, is giving gestures towards having talks, it then is up to the Indian government to reciprocate. Because, as I say, if you don't have talks, you're not going to get anywhere. At least if you have talks, it leaves the way open for some form of reconciliation, some form of idea that we are concerned that this is an issue which could blow up out of all proportions. As we know from past history, it's very easy to start wars. It's much more difficult to stop them. And having had a war, God forbid if ever India and Pakistan did go to war, the repercussions, the fallout afterwards is tragic for the people. The governments don't suffer, those in power don't suffer, but it's the youth, the young people who suffer. And you would say with both India and Pakistan's problems, it's in their interest, because you are sitting both countries on a demographic time bomb. You're both running out of water. You have development issues you have poverty eradication, you have so many other things to focus on. You have education. You know, education is important because without education you can't have aspirations to have a job other than a labourer or a farm worker or something. But people have aspirations and they should be allowed to fulfil them. But all of those aspects on a government's agenda need to be addressed, not massive amounts spent on military budgets in order to fight each other. And that is, as I say, absolute priority.
You know, as you came here after some time in between, and as you must have been reading about Kashmir while you were in London. So after coming here and spending these 10 days, and I want to ask the question, how much do you think the media reporting is justified on Kashmir? Did you have the same understanding of Kashmir before you just came 10 days ago, like what you saw here right now?
There's no substitute for being here on the ground. And, you know, I think we as journalists, as writers, historians, we know that. I mean, for reasons which relate to just life in general, one can't always be on the location. But one of the reasons I wanted to spend, not just jet in here for 2 days and do a few interviews and leave, is because primary source material is the most valuable source material.
I'm asking more about the people. Do you think they have the understanding what's going on here with the people?
No, I don't. I don't think so, because it gets diluted, and that's, you know, it's part of the same answer to the question, that by being here I'm now even knowledgeable as, you know, I am about the history of Kashmir. I'm far more knowledgeable. I'm 10 times more knowledgeable than just sitting in the comfort of my home, notwithstanding the fact I've got contacts. Because by definition, as I say, it's diluted when it gets back into sort of, you know, a sort of second, third hand environment. But I think one of the problems is that because not that many comparatively people come here for a length of time, they are writing from third-hand information, so they don't understand. So when the issue is reported in the papers, it's not with a great level of understanding. For example, when you had the Pulwama attack, people were talking about Kashmir and then they were talking about Jammu as though it was a different region without a comprehension that it was part of the state, you see. So that isn't sort of very beneficial to an understanding of the issue.
You think there's less first-hand information or reporting?
I think there is less first-hand because I mean you can testify that not that many foreigners come, or you know, if they do come, they come for a couple of days.
There's less reporting in the foreign media on Kashmir.
Yes, and that is, you know, another aspect. Unfortunately, as we know with all newspapers, they have, you know, X numbers of pages they're going to cover. And unless there's, you know, for the bad reasons, Kashmir will be in the news, it's not in the news because they're reporting something else. And unless you have journalists who've gone there, you know, what are they going to do? Take agency copy? They're not necessarily going to want that in the newspapers. So it requires a passion and a will to want to push Kashmir up onto the agenda of, you know, newspaper editors. And it's not necessarily sinister. It is because there is a lot of other world news, and as you know, there's a lot of issues going on in other countries. But as I say, I don't think that, you know, to me, that doesn't mean that, you know, Kashmir doesn't deserve to be in the news every so often, particularly because it's so important. And I think one of the issues is that, you know, people get confused about the issue because it's an Indo-Pakistan issue, and the sort of nuances of what's actually going on in the valley of Kashmir, they somehow get lost in talking about it as though it's an
India-Pakistan makes it international news, and the Kashmir is somewhere away from the whole thing. So, you know, my last question would be like, so are you working on a new book on Kashmir, or it's just generally you're reporting?
Well, I have my one book that I wrote in 1996. It was published. But that book has always been the book that I've gone back to revise. And so what I really want to do is keep the body of that book and bring out another edition with one or two more chapters, which I might, you know, focus literally the last decade, because to bring it up to date, because it's this last decade that's not been covered in my book. And you know, along with being able to write more articles and talk more authoritatively than if I'd just not come. So I'm delighted to have come, and I've loved my visit. And I've loved being back with my friends.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. Thank you for
Thank
speaking
you
to
for
the
her.
Kashmir Walla. We'll see you soon.
See you.
Thank you.